welcome to YA Conversations. I'm George, I have Zach here, I have Madeline here, and we have a special guest, Destiny.
Hi guys.
Hi Miss Destiny, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am a part of the Impact family. I went to Impact London for about 8 years. So it's nice to see you guys again. And I moved to Nova Scotia to help with my parents with Impact Bridgewater. And I'm also currently at Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. So it's been super fun. And yeah, I'm glad to be with you guys today.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So last week we talked about the difference between spirituality and religion and how sometimes it's really, everybody has a different definition, right, for those words. And so today we thought we'd tackle maybe hearing the voice of God, because does everybody hear the voice of God differently? Is he still speaking? And when he speaks, what does it sound like? So, Zach, what do you want to start the conversation off with? Which question?
Well, how about we were talking last week about whether like Christians or non-Christians can hear God's voice, and then the conversation just kind of spiraled off of that, and people were kind of wondering and wanting to hear from different people how they hear God speaking to them and how to recognize that it is God. So maybe a good place to start would be, I don't know, like Destiny, let's start with you. You're a special guest. How do you hear God speak to you? Like we were talking last week about words. Like do you hear words in your brain? Do you hear audible words? Like how does this work for you?
Yeah, so sometimes I can get a feeling like in the pit of my stomach. I know when Holy Spirit wants me to do something because I get warmth in my stomach sometimes, or I'll get pictures a lot as well. So when I prophesy over people, I'll see a picture of them doing something, or maybe God will give me just a picture. I'm like, does this mean anything to you? And so, yeah, that took a while for me to figure out, just practice, I think, also learning that God is laced in my imagination as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely different ways that God speaks to people, because I remember when I first started learning about God's word and God's voice, I would look at people and be like, oh, God doesn't speak to me like that. Do I really hear his voice? Like he speaks to them with like audibly, or he speaks to them with a feeling or whatever, but he doesn't speak to me that way. So is this really God's voice? And so, yeah, I had to learn about just my own personal relationship with God, and that the fact that he speaks to everybody in different ways. So, yeah.
Okay, so how do you, just unpack that a little bit, how do you know that the warm feeling in your stomach is God? And it's not you had a bad piece of pizza or something?
I think it's hard to explain, but sometimes when I walk into like a grocery store or something, and I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to be open to you right now. Do you want me to speak to somebody, or do you want me to do whatever? And maybe I'll look at somebody and I'll just like get that feeling like, oh crap, I'm supposed to talk to them. And it's up to me whether I do that or not. But it's just a knowing kind of inside of me that it's not a bad piece of pizza. It's just a feeling of something I'm supposed to do. Or maybe I'm just walking and I get that feeling, and God will say something in my mind of, oh, I want you to do this, or I want you to go this way, or I want you to whatever. And so, yeah, it's kind of just a knowing for me personally.
Right. Okay, yeah. So one more question then. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But, when you say picture, what do you mean? You got a picture? Like you just see like a vision of something float through your mind, or are you like, oh my goodness, the heavens are open and I see something? Like, what do you mean by picture?
Yeah, it's definitely in my mind. I'll close my eyes, and it's like if I tell you to close your eyes right now and picture a pink elephant, you'll see that pink elephant in your mind, and kind of like that is the way to describe it for the way that God speaks to me. I'll close my eyes, or sometimes I don't need to close my eyes, and I'll just see like a picture run through my mind. And that's kind of come from me figuring out that God is in my imagination as well. And sometimes I'll think, oh, it's just me, but then it's not. Because when I take the risk, it actually means something to the person that I'm talking to. Like, oh, I should pay attention to that little thing that runs across my mind. Maybe it's actually God. So, yeah.
Okay, that's really good. Yeah. Maddie, how do you hear God's voice? How does he speak to you? How do you recognize?
A little bit what Destiny's talking about, like just knowing sometimes. but also through music and song lyrics, which is really funny. I remember this could sound really silly, but I think I was in grade 11 in high school, and I was having a really sad, discouraging couple of months just with school, probably schoolwork, could have been some friends or whatever it was. And I remember lying on the bed and the radio was on, and the band Headley, the song It's Never Too Late. And it really just encouraging lyrics, like all of it. And as it started, as I was like on my bed and I was having like being really sad, and then I started to listen to the lyrics, and then there was something like, again, this feeling of like, oh, it kind of feels like something more. Like I almost feel like the Lord is trying to encourage me through this song. Like it's never too late to get up and start all over again. Like, just kind of, it's going to be okay. And that was the very first kind of moment that I realized like, oh, Jesus can also speak to me through songs. And so since that point, it's been I've had multiple times where I'm like, why is this song stuck in my head really annoyingly? And it would come out of nowhere. Like there is no way that I've heard this artist in a really long time. And then I would go to play it, and then it would be, and then I just feel like the Lord was talking to me about something. And so it doesn't necessarily always look like pictures for me, but it could also look like songs, right? And not just like worship songs or whatever. It could also be all kinds of music. So
nice.
That's so
George,
cool.
Can I ask you? My question is for you actually, because I'm curious about this. Because sometimes we see you on the stage and you're doing worship, and then like those transition moments between songs, and all of a sudden there's some sort of spontaneous singing, and sometimes even prophesying, and you're clearly connecting with something from God in that moment. Like how are you hearing God in that moment?
It's like Maddie said, like through the music, even through the lyrics. Like sometimes you actually need to listen to the lyrics of what you're singing.
that's good.
Yeah.
Because even like the goodness of God, like that song, like all my life you have been faithful.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes you a while just to realize like, yo, you've been there the whole time.
Yeah.
Like the whole time. Like nothing has changed throughout any situation that you've been through. So like moments like that. Yeah.
Wow. Do you know what I like about this is that it feels like for us, like what you guys are describing anyways is like experiences hearing God that are like very natural. And not like, as much as like I absolutely love the supernatural, like the crazy stuff, like the heavens part, like the heavens open and like out pops an angel and something like that. Like that's awesome. I love when that happens, but like it's all really natural. And Maddie, I love it's like music, because you like music, right?
I think so. I love music, yeah.
Yes, she does.
God's speaking your language, right?
Yep.
So maybe for somebody who likes movies, God would speak to them through movies.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
That's another one. Yes.
So all of these things then too, it also sounds like there's this moment, whether it's through music or whether it's through movies or pictures or just knowing or feeling, there seems to be like this kind of moment where everybody's able to kind of recognize there's something special about this lyric, something special about this feeling, this knowing. Do you know what I mean? Like there's almost this special moment of recognition that this is actually God. This isn't just another song going through my head, or it's not just another feeling, in my stomach in the grocery store. This is actually something about God.
Yeah.
So what, how do you come to know that? Like, how do you come to tell the difference? What do you think? Like, how's that journey been for you guys? Because I can tell you, I've swung and missed so many times.
Yeah.
I've thought that I've heard God in certain things, and it's turned out to not been Him, and I think that's okay. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I'll try to hear God on purpose, and I've made mistakes about it, and I've just, oh wow, like I'm a pretty intuitive person, so sometimes I feel like I'm knowing something and calling it God, but it's not.
Yeah.
But I don't know. How have you guys gone through that journey yourselves?
Destiny?
Yeah, I think it just comes through trial and error, because the first time I ever tried to prophesy over somebody, I don't know if it was technically accurate, but I think when you're practicing, the most important thing is that it's biblical and it's encouraging.
Yeah.
And so even if you're wrong, you encourage the person anyways.
Yeah.
But I remember the first day of ministry school, Chris Valentin got everybody to try prophesy over the person next to you. And I had never done that before. And he was like, ask God what their mom's name is. And at the end, he asked who got it right. And like 2 people out of 1,200 got it right. And he kind of did that to prove that, like, no, this is going to take practice. Like, it's okay to try and to not get it right all the time. So I think after you just grow friendship with God and you just stay aware of him in your everyday life, just like all of us kind of have, it becomes more natural, and certain things will start to become highlighted to you. And from experience, you'll know, oh, that's a little different than normal, or like, oh no, that's the way God speaks to me, so I'm going to pay attention to that. Or maybe I'm praying over this person and a memory comes to my mind, and instead of discounting that and saying, oh, that's just a memory, be like, oh, why did that just come through my mind right now? And then when I take a risk with that, it usually means something to the person. So yeah, I just think it just comes from awareness and practice for me.
You guys?
I feel the same way. It's honestly learning every day.
Yeah.
Because you can try and fail, but I would say to still try.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. So the Bible does say when you do prophesy, you do it in proportion to your faith. But what about this then? So there's this developing of experience and relationship, but I think oftentimes when I hear people talk about hearing God's voice, it's often in the context of like doing some sort of ministry or sharing God's word with somebody else or something. But I mean, do you ever hear God speak to you just like about you, just about your life, just about normal everyday kind of friendship type stuff? Or is that is God only speaking to us about other people and ministry stuff, or what do you hear regularly from God?
Yeah, there was a season in my life where I noticed how hard on myself I was being, and I still deal with that, but that's when I first started becoming aware of it. And so I heard from a leader, if you're dealing with this, then maybe by the end of your day, just ask God 5 reasons he's proud of you. And so I started to do that, and he would give me way more than 5 reasons. And that really helped me just stop being so hard on myself and give myself grace and just hear the little things that God noticed about me. Even if I barely did anything that day, he'd be like, oh, I'm so glad you said thank you. Or I'm so proud of you for just encouraging that one person. Or I'm so proud of you for resisting that temptation, or literally anything. And so, yeah, that's one example for me.
Really good. Really good. I was remembering a time when usually when I hear God speak, it's also for me kind of a knowing. Occasionally I'll like hear him. Sometimes I'll see something or whatever, but most of the time it's a knowing. And but one time I actually heard him speak to me and say, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "Wow." And I started talking about like all the things that I was doing, and like kind of giving like this report over like the different areas of my life. And I think I was like just beginning school at this time or something like that. And I was just so caught up in all the stuff that I was doing. And he's like, no, Zach, like, how are you? Like, how are you doing? And I was like, oh my goodness, you actually like, you care and you want to have a conversation with me about me and how I'm doing. And I'm just like my emotional state in the moment and just how I'm doing in life. And I was just like, this is amazing. This is like real full-on relationship. And I think sometimes it's possible to pigeonhole God and not let him speak to us, except for in areas that we think that he will. And I think one of the traps and the dangers is to believe that he'll only speak to us in either the super spectacular or like the ministry kind of context. So I don't know. I've developed an appreciation for the fact that he wants to speak to me in a relational kind of way throughout all of my day. Like I wasn't even praying. I wasn't even like, oh Jesus, what are you saying right now? It's just kind of, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sometimes he just like comes out of nowhere too. And I love that so much because I find that this year I started just going out for walks. I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna go for a walk with you, you know? But I put so much pressure on it. I was like, I'm gonna have to come out of this with this huge revelation, or I'm gonna have to have a great conversation with God, and I'm gonna have to hear him so well. And I came out of my walk, I'm like, that was so stressful for me. Like, that wasn't even fun. Because I just put so much pressure on hearing his voice or hearing him in a certain way. So I was like, okay, that's hard for me, so I'm going to keep doing this. And so I just kept going on for walks until I stopped expecting things, and I would just go for walks with God, whether he said something or I said something or not. It was just going, and it was so peaceful by the end when I just realized I can just be with his presence, and I don't have to put pressure on hearing something specific or him telling me what I'm going to do with my life or like any of that. Yeah, I think that's just the best part. One of the best parts of friendship with God is there's not a lot of pressure on it.
That's great. So there's a whole bunch of, I think, like a big emphasis in the New Testament and about the grace of God that has to do with rest. Mm-hmm. Kind of resting, relaxing, and trusting. How important, Maddie, do you think that is to hearing God's voice? To just resting.
Really important.
Yeah.
I think, resting is really important. I've found myself squeezing so hard in moments to like hear his voice, or like, okay, it's time to do prophetic ministry, or it's time to go encourage someone on the street. And that is so much harder than there have been moments where I'm like passing someone and literally I have a thought like, and now it's super subtle. It's like, wow, that person looks really good today, or it could be a bunch of things. Great job teaching up there, or I'll think of someone and be like, oh, I should send them flowers, or I should bake them something, or just send them a message. And so I've learned that is like, oh, that's probably like because that person might need encouragement. And so I've learned to now take those little instinctual things, like while I'm resting, right? While I'm literally just going about my day. And every time I think of someone now, I just take that as, oh, I can message them just to see how they're doing. Or, oh, I can pop by and ask them if they want to hang out. And so that is so much easier than like, okay, Monday at 7 a.m. for my personal time, I'm going to think about 5 people who I haven't talked to in a while that I can minister to, whatever, right? Yeah. So, man, just go about life. And I think Impact Church has really has taught me to just relax, like be chill, right? Like supernatural can look natural, right? Like it doesn't have to be a big stage performance or something you try hard at. So
that's pretty cool. I'd say like pretty much when I think about it, pretty much all of the spectacular experiences I've had, like, you know, like whatever, those have all been things that I haven't been looking for. They've almost just happened. Yeah. And like when you rest in it, then you can kind of go back into it and you kind of do it at will. Yeah. But like when it first started, you just got to rest. You got to be cool. Like you said, you got to relax.
You got to be cool.
You got to be cool. Jesus is the door into spiritual experience, right? He is my rest. He's you know, so it's all good. So what, let's think of one piece of advice then you would give somebody right now who's saying, you know, I want to hear God's voice. I want to hear him clearer. There's somebody out there struggling thinking, man, I just want this more in my life. What would your, what would your piece of advice to that person be? Destiny, you start us off.
I would say just try and just do it. And yeah, like just it'll come eventually, and don't put too much pressure on it happening right away. If you prophesy over somebody, just make sure it's encouraging, and that's what's going to affect their day no matter what. Whether you take that risk and say, oh, does this mean to you? And they say, no, it's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up. I would just say, just go for it. And trial and error is totally okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's totally okay. So that's my advice. I wish I heard that when I first started. I'm like, Yeah, I just need to go for it and just say yes. And I think it'll get better from there.
Well, I know that on the past Friday Zoom call, you had a word of knowledge for somebody, and you shared a bit of a prophetic word for somebody, and it was really encouraging for them, and like it was just really awesome to see. So, good job, George. What's your piece of advice?
Honestly, I would say just rest.
Rest.
Like, honest, I feel like even in our generation, like we're all speedy. We got to do this, we got to do that. I would say just rest, chill.
Yeah.
Like,
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Maddie, what's your advice?
I would say if you're questioning, is this the voice of God or not? Does he speak to me? I would ask, does it line up with the nature of God? So what I mean is like, does it sound kind, loving, peaceful? And I've just heard this thing with hearing the voice of God. Does it always builds up, always cheers up, and draws people closer to God, which are three, just very positive things usually. Yeah.
That's really good. Wow. Well, this Friday, we're going to talk about hearing God's voice in our Zoom conversation with young adults, right? So it'd be a good idea for those guys who are going to be jumping in with us. Come prepared to tell us your ghost stories. Come prepared to tell us your experiences of hearing God's voice and how you've done that in the past and what that sounds like for you. And like we've been talking about today, it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to say, I'm trying, I'm learning. Because I think the piece of advice that I would give is that it's rest, like you said, George, because it's actually really natural and it's really innate. As Pastor Carl was saying in one of his most recent sermons, he was saying it is innate. It's something that's inward. It's like we've been born again with an ability to hear God, and His Spirit inside of us. The hearing ear and the seeing eye both come from the Lord. So we are equipped by Him to hear His voice. And Jesus said, "My sheep hear His voice." So, or my sheep hear my voice. So I've always taken that to mean that He is taking on the responsibility of making sure that I hear His voice, and He's more actively involved in making sure His communication is getting through than I am trying to receive it. So I kind of throw the responsibility in a certain sense back to God and just trust that He's able to communicate better with me than I'm able to shut it down. So I trust His goodness. He's going to get through. He's going to speak to me. He's going to speak my language, and I'm just not going to shut down any avenue that He might speak. So it's good stuff. Anything else? Any final words? Hearing God's voice?
He speaks to everybody.
He speaks to everybody. He speaks all of our languages. And we're going to have a great conversation on Friday. So join our Zoom call. Pay attention to social media. We'll get you that link.
Are we going to get them that link, Zach?
Well, just email groups@impactlondon.ca and I'll give you that link.
Right on. All right. Is that it?
That's it. I think that's all we got for today. I'm here.
All right, guys. See you next week.
Okay.
Bye. Friday and then Monday.